such as this, I reflect on how love has guided my life. Love for my husband, love for my queen, love for the ʻāina, love for Kanaka Maoli. Love is a gift that must be defended and fought for lest the world erode it away. Nothing is more vital than this struggle, and I dedicated my life to it. I was born in 1854 on Kūʻē on Hawaiʻi Island. My mother was the daughter of a chief. My father, a Chinese immigrant who started a sugar plantation in Hilo. My 4 sisters and I, well, we were known as beauties of some renown. Kapua o Kina, the flower of China, we were called. This might have gone to my head were I not instilled with a strong sense of pride for the culture of my home. I am Emma Aima Ai, but you may be more familiar with my married name, Emma Nāwahī. I was a teacher's assistant at the United School of Hilo when I first met Joseph Nāwahī. He was charismatic and passionate, and though only 8 years my senior, very accomplished in his field. He was the principal for Hilo boarding school, a cartographer, and a surveyor. And he won his license to practice law with no formal training. He did not neglect his artistic side, publishing mele and creating skillful paintings. The surviving canvases remain highly regarded. But he was best known for his many terms representing Puna and later Hilo. On the floor of the House, his powerful oratory in defense of the people was legendary. In fact, he and his friend and fellow representative, George W. Pilipo, were known as the Lions of the Pacific and the Cannons of the legislature. In Joseph, I saw mirrored my own passionate devotion to our people. On the 17th of February, 1881, we united this commitment through marriage. In 1875, in exchange for a military base at Puʻuloa, Pearl Harbor, the United States eliminated taxes on incoming sugar. This reciprocity treaty dazzled many with its wealth, but I only saw the threat on our kingdom. Joseph railed against it in legislature. I say that this treaty is a nation-stealing treaty. The Treaty of Reciprocity becoming law for the land will be the first step of annexation later on. And the kingdom, its flag, its people will become for naught. The people had a fierce champion in Joseph Nāwahī. But the treaty was ratified regardless. By 1887, the Hawaiian League, a secret society of avaricious businessmen, lawyers, foreigners, and Hawaiians of American descent, plotted to strip King Kalakaua of his powers. Aided by an armed militia, they compelled him to sign, under threat of violence, a new constitution. This bayonet constitution placed authoritative power with the legislature, which was mostly controlled by American businessmen. Adding insult to injury, this bayonet constitution raised property ownership and income requirements, disqualifying all but affluent Hawaiians while granting white foreigners the vote. Asians were specifically forbidden from voting. Women weren't included at all. Petitions for revised voting requirements with no or minimal income requirements, and even some granting Native women the vote, were all introduced and then squashed by the legislature. My guiding principle was the uplift of the Hawaiian people, and Joseph shared that vision. We advocated for the rights of all Hawaiians, and yet my voice would not be heard at the ballot box. This was not just. Historically, women had enjoyed some political power. The office of Kuhina Nui, Prime Minister, was typically female, and Many governors of the islands were women as well. Western concepts of government and civilization wanted to delegate me to the role of a fly buzzing in my husband's ear. When Liliuokalani ascended the throne, her fierce determination was an inspiration as a Hawaiian and as a woman. She met with strong resistance. The legislature was in a hopeless mire of conflicting interests. Annexationists, royalists, a faction wanting a republic were all fighting for control. I became a close advisor to the Queen as she quietly moved forward to return power to the throne and to the people. After an unprecedented 171 days of deadlock in the legislature, she dissolved it. She had entrusted Joseph with co-authoring a new constitution, and she simply planned to announce it as law during the recess, much as Kamehameha V had done years before. Fearing both retaliation and civil unrest, her cabinet refused to support her. Rumors of her plans swirled around Honolulu, sparking rallies and meetings. A pro-annexation group, comprised of many of the same men that brought about the bayonet constitution, formed the Committee of Safety, bent upon abolishing the monarchy. On January 17th, 1893, they deposed the Queen and installed a provisional government whose goal was swift annexation to the United States. How tempting it was to react with violence, but instead we chose a more civilized approach than the usurpers. Opposition groups were peacefully formed. The Hui Aloha ʻＡina, or Hawaiian Patriotic League, coalesced around Joseph as their leader. Likewise, I helped to create the Hui Aloha ʻAina o Nā Wahine, a sister organization, some 11,000 members strong, with Mrs. Abigail Kūʻē Campbell as our leader. The United States sent James Blount to investigate the legality of the overthrow. Both branches of the Hui Aloha ʻAina presented petitions to him. The women's statement read, in part, "We, the women of the Hawaiian Islands, for our families and the happiness of our homes, desire peace and political quiet, and we pray that man's desire for spoils and power shall not be allowed to disturb the otherwise happy life of these islands, and that the revolutionary agitations and disturbances inaugurated here since 1887 by a few foreigners may be forever suppressed." Some of the Hui members were married to white men, but evidently their love for their land and their people eclipsed any want of political harmony with their husbands. Our petitions convinced Blount, and President Cleveland declared the overthrow illegal. But he stopped short of restoring the monarchy. The United States Congress was tasked with resolving that issue. Debate raged during the Constitutional Convention of 1894 over the shape of the new republic's electorate. Significantly, the inclusion of women was beginning to be taken seriously. A change was proposed for the qualifications for voters of representatives. The striking of the word male from the sentence "shall be a male to vote in the republic." The indignant opposition declared, "The women cannot run a feast of nations without getting into the wool with each other. And if they ever get a chance to meddle in politics, it will simply be hell. Let them stick to picnics, tea parties, dinners, high teas, prayer meetings, and moonlight flirting. But don't make life miserable for the men by letting them find political women at home when they seek rest. We have too much politics now, and if we let the women in, there will be no end to it." They even insulted our queen over the issue, claiming, "We have had enough of Wahine politics in this country." Only a short time ago, this nation was turned topsy-turvy, and families were separated on account of a woman in politics. But let us examine some of these arguments and see if we can find any logic within them. It is such a shock to our feelings to think of a woman walking into a polling place and dropping a vote into the box just like a man. Truly, I am sorry to have shocked men's feelings. But let me ask if it pains them truly to see a woman providing for herself just like a man. Have they never heard of a woman supporting the whole family, including the man? I have. And she was not unwomanly either. If the women vote, they will neglect their household duties. Their husbands would weep over lost buttons parted to meet no more. The boys' trousers would go unpatched. The dust of ages would lie on the furniture, and the men would have a hard time all around. I admit, this is a sad picture of a suffering man. But what right has anyone to jump to such a conclusion? Why must a woman neglect her home any more than a man neglects his business when he goes to drop his vote into the ballot box for 5 minutes? In the end, the Wahine were too much of a threat to be granted suffrage. The new regime was consolidating their power, and nothing would stand in their way, especially a group that might vote against their interests. We appealed for foreign aid, writing letters with the Hui Aloha, decrying the overthrowers' plans to proclaim an assumed republic through a constitution which is acknowledged as the most illiberal and despotic ever published by civilized countries. 2 days before the usurpers intended to announce their republic, over 7,000 people massed at Palace Square to protest. Joseph gave voice to what we held in our hearts. The house of government belongs to us, as the Kamehamehas built it. We've been ousted by trespassers who have come into our house and tell us to go and live in a lay stand that they think to build for us and force us into. On July 4th, 1894, the United States officially recognized the tyrants as the Republic of Hawaii, and the pillaging of our government was complete. The new regime had many adversaries, and Joseph's skillful oratory and large following drew much attention. 6 months later, charging treason, authorities arrested him and searched our home for hidden weapons. O dainty lehua blossom, there with hopoi, you beautify our relationship. Love will always be with you, like the misty rains of the uplands. The man who wrote those words for me died on September 14th, 1896, of tuberculosis, contracted while in prison, the Oahu prison. I returned his remains to the islands of his birth, and in the faces of thousands of mourners, I was reminded that my work was not done. Joseph and I founded a newspaper, Kealoha ʻāina, at a time when even our language was under assault. We published in the Hawaiian language exclusively and quickly became a bulwark against annexation and supporting Hawaiian language and culture. In 1896, William McKinley became president, and the Republic finally had an annexationist ally. Once again, the Hui Aloha ʻāina mobilized to combat them by drafting the Kūʻē Petitions, which we would present directly to Congress. I traveled to Hilo to collect signatures for our petition. Sailing into the bay, we were stunned and honored by the reception we were given. A beautiful, double-hulled canoe covered with lei, maile, and other flowers, and a Hawaiian flag behind ferried us into the bay. I took charge of the meeting. A woman from the San Francisco Chronicle expressed her surprise at seeing another woman take charge in such a political atmosphere. I watched Miss Emma Nāwahī curiously as she rose to address the people. Would this Hawaiian woman be shy or timid, self-conscious or assertive? Not any of those. This Hawaiian woman's thoughts were of her subject and not of herself. Our drive was an enormous success, and altogether we collected over 21,000 signatures. This proved that a vast majority of Hawaiians opposed annexation and ensured its failure in Congress. But the Spanish-American War proved a convenient pretext, and annexation came to pass in 1898. In the following 2 decades, I continued to lend my voice to the Hawaiian movement to grant women's suffrage. Women had proved to be an energetic and effective force during the struggle of annexation. There was no denying our importance as allies, nor discounting our right to govern our own future. In the pages of Aloha ʻāina, I frequently clarified in black and white the logic and inevitability of enfranchisement. Women are intelligent people that can read and write. Women are not ignorant pagans that cannot give votes. This is a time of enlightenment. There is intelligence in both men and women. This is not a time of arrogance. This is a time of work, of men working and women working for the betterment of their family. We had won many people, politicians and populists alike, over to the side of women's suffrage. And by 1919, we succeeded in getting a bill through to the Senate. However, it stalled in the House over when to implement this law. As the date of the final vote drew near, we received a letter from Mrs. Wilhelmina Dowsett, one of our staunchest advocates. Legislators were accusing her and other suffragists of trying to force their agenda upon the other islands. And she asked us to make note of how much support there was for women's suffrage on the Big Island. I immediately called for a public meeting in Hilo, and many Hawaiian women who supported women's suffrage turned out in large numbers, punctuating my speech with bursts of applause. Years ago, the husbands thought that women should stay and tend the home and the children. And for many years, this has kept women back. But now is the time for women to come forward. And while not forgetting their duties to their home and their children, take part in a government for all. All women, Hawaiian and white, are citizens of the United States and Hawaii, and should all cooperate for the public good. I had not seen such enthusiastic participation in Hilo since the Kūʻē drives. School teachers and Boy Scout troops canvassed the islands to secure signatures, and on every hand were met with encouragement from both men and women who believed that the women of Hawaii's vote should be heard. And with their aid, we were able to compile over 7,000 signatures, definite proof of Hawaiʻi Island's support of the suffrage movement. Despite the undeniable will of the people, a group of small men managed to clutch to their power and defeat the bill. This time, however, we were assisted by the United States Congress. The 19th Amendment was ratified later that year, ensuring that the women of Hawaii had a definitive voice in the future of our home. It would take until statehood to be heard on the national level, but I'm afraid I could not wait so long. On December 28th, 1935, I took one last breath and returned finally to the ʻāina that I loved and to the side of my husband. Before I bid you good night, I am reminded once again of the eloquence of Joseph Nāwahī and the principles by which we lived our life. The first father and mother of human beings, Adam and Eve, are made of the material of dirt and earth, filled with the breath of life. All of the peoples living are made of fragments of the dirt and are part of the earth that God made. And therefore, it may be correctly said that the land itself is walking and living upon the earth. Living and walking are the children of the land, the grandchildren of the land, the people of the land, walking upon their great mother, the earth. Who is your mother? She is the land. Who is your grandmother? She is the land. What of Eve, our very first grandmother? She is the soil of the land. Thus, love for your mother, for your lands, for the place you were born. That is what will make the days and the years of your life long. Aloha. Mahalo. Here at the Hawaiian Mission House's Historic Site and Archives, we are honored to be stewards of this historic space and to create programming that fosters community engagement and discussion of a rich history from multiple perspectives, which impacts us all today.
The Hawaiian Mission House's Historic Site and Archives was founded in 1820 by Protestant missionaries from New England as the Sandwich Islands Mission. Today, we are a national historic landmark and accredited by the American Alliance of Museums. Thousands of visitors are hosted each year with engaging programs, significant archival collections, and site tours.